Friday the 13th. You know that feeling, right? Gives you the chills. 13. It's gotten a seriously bad rap.
Oh, yeah.
But, our listeners, they sent in some really interesting stuff about how the Bible, it kind of flips the script on this whole unlucky 13 thing. We're not talking black cats and ladders here. This is biblical numerology, folks. We're going deep on the number 13. Trust me, you'll never look at this number the same way again.
You know what's interesting? That whole fear of 13, it's so deep-rooted. It even affects how people see the Bible sometimes. But you're right. We're not talking about, just plain old luck here. There's a deeper meaning, symbolic language.
Yeah, biblical numerology. It's like this hidden code, right?
Absolutely. Think of it this way. Numbers in the Bible, they often have symbolic meaning. It's not just about their face value.
Okay, so give us an example.
Like the number 12, right? 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles. You see it again and again. It usually represents a kind of wholeness, a complete structure.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see it. So it's not like every time the number 13 pops up in the Bible, there's some big secret prophecy. It's about patterns, context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got it. And one of the biggest things we see with 13 is this theme of rebellion. And it's not by accident. The authors of these texts, they were making a point.
And we see it right off the bat. Genesis 14.4, first mention of 13. It's all about kings rebelling against, who is it, King Chedorlaomer?
Right. It sets the tone for this whole idea of defying divine order, going against the grain, like Adam and Eve, the OG rebels.
Right.
They chose to go their own way. And that choice, those consequences, they echo through the entire Bible.
It's not just some abstract idea, this rebellion. It's about real choices, real people messing up.
Yeah.
You see it with Adam and Eve. Later on, it's the Israelites pushing their luck in the desert. It's such a human thing, this struggle to trust, to obey, especially when it's hard.
And that tension,
Yeah.
right, between what we want and what's, divinely ordained. That's the heart of so many stories in the Bible. That's why this number 13, when it shows up in those moments, it makes you stop and think.
It's like a warning, right?
Right.
But things get even more intense when you think about Judas, the 13th disciple at the Last Supper, the one who betrays Jesus.
You can't ignore that detail.
Yeah.
Now, does the Bible specifically say, hey, 13 is cursed because of Judas? No, but the connection is powerful. You feel it.
It makes you wonder how much of the fear around 13, even today, comes from that one act of betrayal.
It's hard to tell, but it shows how a story, even a single number, can have this ripple effect across time.
It reminds you, the Bible, it's not just some dusty old book. It's woven into our culture, even if we don't realize it. But for all the bad stuff associated with 13, the rebellion, the betrayal, one of the articles you sent, biblical meaning of number 13, symbolism, rebellion, and grace, it said 13 isn't just all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
There's more to it than that.
Oh, it's definitely not a one-sided coin. This is where things get really interesting. The number 13, it can also represent hope.
Really? Hope. How so?
Because, think about it, what usually comes after rebellion in these stories, it's not always just punishment. Often it's about God's grace breaking through.
Okay, now you've got me. Give me an example. Where do we actually see this grace thing with the number 13?
Think about Ishmael, the son of Abraham, but not through Sarah.
Right.
His birth, it kind of threw a wrench in God's promise to Abraham.
Not exactly part of the plan, but how does 13 fit in with Ishmael?
Ishmael. He was circumcised, brought into the covenant with God at the age of 13.
So even though things weren't, by the book, God's grace, it still reached Ishmael, like you said, rebellion, then redemption.
Exactly. It's like 13 is this bridge between, us being human and messing up and the possibility of forgiveness from God. It reminds us God's grace, it's bigger than our mistakes.
That's actually really comforting. Makes those rebellion stories like the Israelites in the desert a little less, bleak. They were always messing up. But God never completely gave up on them, right?
And isn't that something we all need to hear sometimes? It's not about saying it's okay to mess up, but knowing that, even when we stray, there's a way back, a chance to get things right. It's a powerful message of hope.
No doubt. Speaking of hope, we've talked about how 13 can represent both rebellion and God's grace, but some of the stuff you sent, it connected the number 13 to Jesus, and we haven't even touched on that yet. I mean, how does Jesus, the ultimate symbol of redemption, how does he tie into this whole number symbolism thing?
There's an interesting point. The number 13 itself, it's not directly linked to Jesus in the Bible, like the number 7 represents completeness, or 3, the Trinity, but there are some compelling connections.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious. Like,
Well, think about it. Jesus's life, his ministry. It was about turning things upside down, showing a different kind of power. And 13, this number tied to rebelling against earthly authority, it can be seen as like a hint, foreshadowing how Jesus challenged the religious and political systems of his time.
I see what you mean. Like Jesus, he was a rebel in a way, rebelling against hypocrisy, against just following the rules blindly, against anything that got in the way of really connecting with God.
Yes. And remember how 13 represents a shift from judgment to grace. Well, isn't that what Jesus was all about? He offered forgiveness, redemption, a new way of being right with God, not about rules, but about love and grace.
Okay, now it's all clicking. So even though the number 13 isn't directly about Jesus in the text, his life, what he taught, it lines up with that tension between rebellion and grace, being judged and then forgiven, all symbolized by that number 13.
It really is fascinating. It speaks to how powerful this biblical numerology can be. It's
Yeah.
not about finding, these perfect matches. It's about digging deeper, seeing how themes and symbols work together. It's like this tapestry of faith.
I like that. A tapestry, yeah. So much more interesting than just good and bad, lucky and unlucky.
Exactly. Speaking of which, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room.
You mean why people freak out about the number 13 in the first place? Superstition. Yeah. It's everywhere you look, right?
Yeah.
People skipping the 13th floor in buildings, freaking out when Friday the 13th rolls around.
It's kind of wild when you think about it. This number, so much meaning in the Bible, and somehow it turned into this pop culture boogeyman.
Makes you wonder how much of that fear is, really from the Bible itself and how much is just, well, stuff we've picked up along the way.
Right. It's like, which came first? That there's a point that one of the articles you sent, number 13 meaning in the Bible, is it really bad luck? It said, we can't let superstition hijack the real message of the Bible.
Don't let fear run the show. Go back to the source. Right.
Exactly. Think for yourself. Question things. Blind faith can be just as bad as blind fear.
You said earlier that rebelling could actually lead to a stronger connection with faith. That really got me thinking. Could you unpack that a bit more?
Sure. Sometimes, when we feel furthest from God, those times when we're doubting, questioning, even rebelling, those are the very things that can help us grow spiritually.
It sounds kind of backwards, though, right? How does that work?
Well, think of it like this. When we're forced to face our doubts head on, wrestle with tough questions, we come out the other side with a deeper, more real understanding of what we believe.
So it's like those times of questioning, even straying from what we thought we believed, they make our faith stronger in the end.
Exactly. We rebuild, but on a stronger foundation. It's not just about blindly accepting. It's about really grappling with faith with all its complexities.
Wow. What a powerful way to look at it. So instead of being scared of those moments of doubt, we can actually see them as chances to grow, turning points.
Exactly. Don't run from the questions. Wrestle with those doubts. That's where the real growth happens.
That's incredibly insightful. So as we wrap up this deep dive into biblical numerology and this number that gets a bad rap, 13, what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners hold on to?
If you remember just one thing, remember this. Numbers. They can have layers of meaning. Don't just scratch the surface, especially when it comes to faith. Question. Explore. You might be surprised by what you find.
And about the number 13, don't let superstitions dictate your life. Forget about luck, good or bad. The number 13, it's like a lot of things in the Bible. It shows us how complex we are as humans. We rebel, we seek forgiveness, we mess up, we get back up again.
And it's in that journey, that back and forth, that we discover what faith is truly about.
Beautifully put. So next time you see the number 13, don't freak out. Take it as an invitation to look at your own journey, to wrestle with those tough questions, and to remember that even when things seem dark, grace is always within reach. And on that note, until our next deep dive, keep searching for those hidden depths.